My name is Caleb Midgley. I'm a product manager with EarthDaily Agro. EarthDaily Agro is an organization that has been around for 20 years, 20 plus years, creating analytics in the ag space using remote sensing and different models. So excited to talk with you today about Earth observation, which again is something we've been doing for quite a while at EarthDaily Agro, but applying it to the specific topic of carbon intensity. I think carbon intensity might be the only rival for artificial intelligence these days in terms of popularity, especially because you've got a tax credit that's coming up that really needs to leverage that metric. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Earth observation can help you assess that metric. All right, so the Clean Fuel Production Credit, or the 45Z rule, which is coming up in 2025, is a fantastic opportunity for growers and biofuel producers to benefit from regenerative ag practices. Now, it's going to work out in two different ways. The biofuel producer is looking for low carbon intensity feedstock, and the producer is the one who's going to be selling that, and it's going to have a premium value associated with it. What is low carbon intensity feedstock? Well, according to the rule, you as a grower need to produce your feedstock, your soy, your corn, with no-till, with cover crops implemented, and enhanced efficiency nitrogen fertilizer. That's a mouthful, for corn only. You check those boxes and you have a low carbon intensity feedstock that can be sold to a biofuel producer, and they can get a credit from that. So this is actually a good thing. It's going to allow folks to do a lot more in terms of regenerative ag and provide a win-win on both sides. Anytime you have some sort of a credit, now you've got record keeping associated with it. You got a lot of documentation, extra work. So the question is, how can you automate this process and make it more efficient? And we believe that remote sensing, satellite data, that type of information can actually help you there. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more. Now, generally speaking, remote sensing can help you in a lot of different areas, not just when it comes to carbon intensity. What we've got here is a diagram of a crop cycle that has cover crops in it. And there's a lot of different activities or important markers, and the ones that are in the orange or yellow rectangle, however you see that, remote sensing can support the assessment of those quantities, and specifically for the clean fuel production credit reporting, cover crop, and tillage practices. Okay. Now, I work for EarthDaily Agro, so I'd be remiss not to say that we are going to be launching a constellation very soon. This constellation, as it relates to this specific topic, is going to be very helpful because it's going to have quite a few spectral bands that will enhance or enable you to look at certain features of a field that will tell you whether certain regenerative ag practices are taking place, assuming you bring it together with some on-field data and appropriate models. So you're looking at the bands from, say, the red edge of the visible down into the infrared. You're talking about looking at things like brightness characteristics of the field, or what's the thermal state of the field, how much moisture is in the field. All these things play into what's happening with the carbon in the field. And so the constellation is going to be very helpful, and one of the tools, not the only tool obviously, but one of the tools that go into assessing carbon intensity. All right, so I've showed you a bunch of boxes there. Let's narrow down on a few of those boxes, specifically to 45Z. One of those boxes you have to check is no-till activity, or basically you're not tilling that field. So when you talk about tillage, what you're basically doing is overturning the soil. You're changing the brightness of the surface. You're changing the moisture content of the surface. You're changing the temperature of the surface. All those signals can be detected from remote sensing devices depending on what bands you're looking at. And so if you have the appropriate bands, data, as well as any other ground truth data to calibrate against that, you can actually say, yeah, this field has undergone tillage, or this field has not been tilled. So that's one of the analytics that we actually have done at EarthDaily Agro. And you can see on the right how the field progressively becomes darker as tillage occurs. I mean, yeah, we all expect that, but the science behind that is you can actually look at signals and interpret those signals and say something happened in terms of regenerative ag or didn't happen. And then if we go to cover crops, as another one of those boxes you have to check, Fundamentally, a cover crop is just a crop that's grown out of cycle from your primary crop. So what you're really looking for is a signal that shouldn't be there, if you will. If you're growing corn, and so what we've got here on this plot on the right is NDVI, which is a measure of the vigor of vegetation in a field using different spectral bands. If you look on the right, that's when corn was growing. You can't see the dates there, but the typical dates for corn are from, in this field, from May to September. So you got this peak of NDVI. Now, if there's no cover crop there, then you should not see any peak to the left here previous to that. However, in this field, you've got these peaks before the corn starts being grown. That's your cover crop. You're actually seeing a peak vegetation signal where corn is not actually being grown. That is one of the things that you can interpret using spectral data to say, hey, this is another practice or another box that has been checked in this field such that they're growing low carbon intensity feedstock here, okay? And then really the Rosetta Stone, the one we really want to figure out how much soil organic carbon is in the field, because that's really what carbon intensity is all about. That's the hard one, right? Because there's a lot of factors that go into carbon quantification. Plus, you're not just talking about at the very surface. You're going down deep to figure out how is carbon changing at depth. Well, machine learning is a good way to get at a problem like that, because if you have enough inputs that are somewhat associated with carbon and the amount of carbon in the soil, you put those inputs into a machine learning model, you have some ground truth data to work with, you might be able to come up with something that has some skill in predicting how much carbon is there. And so that's what we've done on the right here with different machine learning models. What you want to see is that those dots line up with the dashed line if the model has skill. And the one in particular that does have skill, the RF model, is doing pretty good there. So am I saying that remote sensing right now is a foolproof way to assess soil organic carbon? Absolutely not. Okay, this right here is a step in the right direction, but it's also a step to scale that assessment, because we're talking about needing to have lots of acres that have low carbon intensity feedstock. Okay, so all those pieces are going to come together, and somebody has to be the arbiter of what is carbon intensity and what's the approved model. As it stands right now, GREET is the model that's going to be calculating carbon intensity. This is maintained and I think developed by Argonne National Laboratory. That's where this image comes from. But what I think is helpful when you look at this image is on the left are the inputs that you need to calculate carbon intensity in a field. Remote sensing cannot do all of this. We cannot tell you how much diesel you burned in your tractor as you went across the field. However, a satellite and the models that I just showed you a little bit ago can tell you something about farming practices in that field. And so all of a sudden you're automating or assessing in a scalable way these inputs into carbon intensity using remote sensing. The other piece here that's interesting is the SOC changes, or the soil organic carbon changes that go into carbon intensity. Again, I just showed you a previous slide. There are ways to get at that which are improving over time. So these are areas where satellite data, remote sensing data, machine learning, all those kind of buzzwords, if you will, are coming together to potentially create a scalable approach at assessing carbon intensity. And if you think about it, if you're somebody who's buying low carbon intensity feedstock, you need to verify that it is what is being purported, what is being said, that yes, this has low carbon intensity. This is a way you can do that if you don't have the records in the field. And so remote sensing is one way to look at that. So overall, what we're looking at here is remote sensing being one of many tools to scale and assess carbon intensity, which will support the 45Z tax credit, maybe other credits or tax incentives that come down the line. You've got a producer that's growing low carbon intensity feedstock. Somebody is going to have to assess, well, is it really low carbon intensity? You can utilize satellite and remote sensing data to look at whether cover crops were implemented, whether no-till was implemented, and then even hopefully in the future we're going to get better at assessing the true soil organic carbon change, which is really what we're after, and then you can feed that into the GREET model, and now you've got this very scalable way to assess carbon intensity. So we're really excited at EarthDaily Agro to be a part of helping out when it comes to this this very good problem that everyone is trying to solve. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we will be around. We also have a meeting room downstairs that you can catch us at. Thanks a bunch.